Hello everybody, welcome to Classic Reddit, where real humans read Reddit content. Today's question from askreddit is by Edgeworth, and it is, Redditors who have hired a private investigator, what did you find out? This post by Crazy Gesture. I hadn't heard from my mom since I was about 15. She was very unstable due to drugs and alcohol, etc. When I was 29, I decided it was time to find out what happened to her. I figured if she was a Jane Doe somewhere that I could put her to rest, and if she was alive that I wanted to let her know I forgave her. I hired a private investigator to help. I guess she was moved by my story, and so she ran into the man my mother was apparently married to on the house. And with one clue from his report, I was able to track them down. I wouldn't have found my mom alive and was just starting out on recovery after being homeless and addicted for many years if it wasn't for the private investigator who kindly ran an extra report for free. My mom has remained sober now for about 7 years and is probably the healthiest she's ever been, physically and emotionally. Wow, that's kind of a positive spin for that. I lost my mom the same way about 2 years ago. I know she's out there and I hope to get to find her in a better state like you did in the future. My mom is about to be 5 years sober. Just alcohol though, she never got into drugs. And she's the happiest and healthiest I've ever seen her. Although we never were estranged, her disease made her act like a different person who was mean-spirited, irrational, etc. When sound of mind, my mom is the sweetest and kindest person around. Now she is herself most of the time and I couldn't be prouder of her recovery. I'm glad that your mother is doing well in recovery as well. It's always been a blessing to get our parents back from addiction. This post by Arbum88. My law firm had a bad faith insurance case several years ago. A guy had gotten hurt at work. He claimed he was disabled because he hurt his back, and he could not lift anything or really engage in any type of physical activity. His disability insurance carrier failed to handle the claim and pay him what he was owed. There was a potential for relatively large damages. In fact, the carrier filed in the court case what is known as an offer to confess judgment. It's a way of agreeing to let judgment be taken for that amount. The plaintiff can accept the offer or reject it. However, if he rejects the offer, he is responsible for the defendant's attorney's fees if the verdict ends up being less than the amount of the offer to confess judgment. The offer in this case was $750,000. He rejected the offer. A few weeks later, our private investigator found out that the plaintiff bowled every week. The private investigator got a video of the plaintiff bowling and copies of his score sheet going several years back through the date of the accident. It was clear he really was not disabled. He also found that plaintiff had been in a car wreck and was making identical injury claims to the other driver's insurance carrier. We filed a motion with the court to dismiss the lawsuit based upon fraud and perjury. The court set a motion for a hearing, but before that happened, the plaintiff dismissed his lawsuit. I had a blown disc and a pretty nasty sciatica for about a year. I could still ski and hike, but I'd pay dearly for it. The mere thought of bowling made me nauseous. A guy who used to work in the same place as my father also became permanently disabled because of an injured back. And then the insurance investigator found him helping his brother with his moving business and hauling heavy pieces of furniture all on his own. Must have been a miracle, I'm sure. I think these people that think that the insurance companies are so rich that $750,000 is nothing to them. They're so clueless that they don't know that people try to defraud them. Really bad at math, $750,000 is a huge sum of money. If they hire the world's best PI full-time for $200,000 a year, and he only stops a fraud of that magnitude once every 3 years, it was still worth it to the insurance company. Man, sounds like $750,000 just fell into the fraudster's lap, and he could have gotten away basically unquestioned. Not the time to get greedy. My grandmother's first boyfriend, after my grandfather died, said he was a retired cop and a veteran. They enjoyed dancing to country music together and bought a new car, in her name though, even though she can't drive anymore. My uncles hired a private investigator. Turns out, that old bastard had a habit of shacking up with the widows and bleeding them dry. The boyfriend, not the private investigator. Not me, but my friend, who is also a lawyer, was handling a contested will. Normally, it's very straightforward. Very straightforward. Huh. Anyway, a woman in her mid-30s husband had just died. He was late in his 70s or early 80s, I can't remember. Still nothing fishy because, hey, nothing wrong with an adult transaction where a very good-looking young woman sleeps with a rich old man in exchange for the use of his credit cards. Here's where it gets slightly concerning. 2 months before his death, he rewrote his will and left everything to her instead of his 5 kids. Around $35 million in cash and assets. And then it gets downright thriller movie-ish. It turns out the woman is a 5-time widow. Now, you may be saying, sure, that could just be the unluckiest, most pitiful widow in the world, but it gets even fishier. In all 5 of her marriages, the wills were rewritten just months before their deaths, and every cause of death was natural causes, despite not all of them being as old as the latest husband, and toxicology tests were not carried out during any of the 5 autopsies. But wait, there's more. It turned out that the widow was never home during any of the deaths, yet insisted the autopsies were carried out at the same institute. But wait, still more. Widow is also distantly related to one of the higher-ups at the institute. Dang, that sounds like a movie. My grandmother said that she wouldn't date anyone because all men want at that age is a nurse or a purse. This is the plot of a movie called The Good Liar with Helen Mirren and Ian McKellen. My uncles hired a private investigator. Turns out that old bastard had a habit of shacking up with widows and bleeding them dry. I'm not native English? Does that mean? That is pretty funny. So shacking up with widows and bleeding them dry does not mean killing widows. It means finding widows who are lonely and have money and benefiting from their money. It's like manipulation, sort of. Posted by Ashray84. It means he exclusively went after women who had lost their husbands and used them for their money, and then moved on to the next victim. I hope this helps you. A reply to Redditors who have hired a private investigator. What did you find out? Not me, but my grandfather did. He was separated from his brother when the Japanese occupied China. My grandfather safely made it to Hong Kong and eventually to Canada. His brother made it to Singapore or Malaysia, according to family friends back then. So my grandfather spent a good 5 years or so working with a private investigator to find his brother so they could be reunited. Sadly, with just a picture and the fact that many people died in the war, it wasn't much to go on. My grandfather is still alive and always thinks of his brother. It's his wish to see him one more time. I tried to stay in Europe doing this exact same thing when I was younger, helping people track down relatives. I did it for myself. I figured I could do it for others. Sadly, never got clients or knew how to market. One can dream. I feel like this type of thing that the Reddit community in general could get on. I swear, this site as a whole could be the world's best private investigator. Last time Reddit played detective, it did not go well. Last time? That was a long time ago. What happened? Well, Reddit thought that they could play detective and find the Boston bomber. Outed this one Middle Eastern guy who had disappeared and revealed his name and other personal details. Turned out it wasn't him, but his family got doxxed anyway. Apparently he had committed suicide and his body was found shortly after. Dang! That really didn't end well. In addition, Reddit harassing the family forced the FBI's hand into announcing that they had photos of the suspects and were working on identifying them. Many have suggested this led to the suspects realizing the FBI was onto them and subsequently murdering an MIT security guard for his gun. It's not a stretch to say that Reddit's doxing of innocent people started the chain events leading to a murder, a carjacking, and a shootout with police. In addition to almost being universally wrong, the theories developed via social media complicated the official investigation, according to law enforcement officials. Those officials said Saturday that the decision on Thursday to release photos of the two men in baseball caps was meant in part to limit the damage being done to people who were wrongly being targeted as suspects in the news media and on the internet. As investigators expected, making the photos public not only brought in new information, but also spurred the brothers into action. Whoa. That was a really good reading. So if you want to learn more about that, you can read a Washington Post article titled "Inside the Investigation of the Boston Marathon Bombing." Sounds interesting. And this, kids, is why doxing is always wrong. You may think he's a pedophile, but what if you ruin a person's life and you were wrong about it? Mob justice is wrong, though there's a much more complicated issue of it suddenly being necessary when organized justice fails the people, but it still has to be handled with extreme care. I was living in Boston at the time, and I don't entirely blame Reddit for this. It was completely irresponsible for the Boston Police Department to release that footage and ask for help. What the hell did they think was going to happen after a terrorist attack? That the country was going to sit back and not do everything they could to find those guys? People in the city were chomping at the bits. They shut us down for a week while they searched. Of course people were going to take that footage, take directive, and go nuts. Reddit went full detective mode and found the infamous Boston bomber, or so they thought. Who they actually found was somebody who had committed suicide days earlier, and then they proceeded to harass their grieving family. The Boston bomber incident, when Reddit tried to play detective and track down the wrong guy, getting an innocent young man in a lot of trouble and essentially ruining his life, driving him to suicide. His name was Sunil Tripathi, if you're interested in reading more about what happened. We did it, Reddit. It sounds like he had committed suicide prior to the misidentification. Still horrible for the harassment that his grieving family felt. Ah, you're right. It's been so many years since that happened I fudged the details. His family had to deal with the fallout. Their loved one went missing, and then a bunch of angry people online seeked them out and harassed them about it. Reddit identified the Boston bomber, who turned out to be not the bomber. He just looked Middle Eastern and was missing during the bombing. Reddit admitted their mistake, but it was after the person's photos had been spread and death threats were sent to their family. The accused bomber had killed himself afterwards, or beforehand. What happened last time? Wait, let me get this straight. So, the accused person committed suicide before they were accused? So, they may have actually been missing because they killed themselves? Huh. Boston Marathon bombing. The hive mind thought they figured out who the guy was, but it was really a student who went missing the month prior. His family, but it was not him. They thought it was a student who had been missing a month prior. His family was harassed. His name was all over social media. Actual big news outlets were showing his name and picture. They found him in the woods, long dead from suicide. Dang. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. I appreciate your time, effort, and attention. If you want to make YouTube content similar to this, where you get to read stuff online, add your own flair, respond, make your own YouTube channel, it's great for people who are intimidated by making your own content on YouTube and editing videos. This is an easier way for you to add your own flair, but browse things you enjoy or find funny on the internet. A great way to run a YouTube channel. Thanks for watching. As always, contact us if you have any questions. We're trying to talk to you. If you want to make content, go to our About page on this YouTube channel, do the little CAPTCHA, and get our email address and let us know that you want to talk, because we want to talk to you. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.